Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Well, hey friends, and welcome back to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. This is episode 8, and I cannot wait to dive into today's topic. We are going to be talking about today what self-care is and what it is not. There are so many myths and ideas around what self-care really is. And I'm going to be busting some of those myths today and really try to help you to see self-care from a different perspective. So an empty lantern provides no light. And self-care is the fuel that allows your light to shine bright. And I know some of you listening to this podcast today don't believe that you are an asset to anyone, not even yourself. So you don't see the need maybe for self-care. And I'm here to tell you, you are an amazing woman gifted by God to do great things. But we can't do those things in a state of burnout. You can't do those things when you're running on the hamster wheel and burning the candle at both ends, period. So I want to start out just by asking you a question. Do you take care of yourself? Do you make yourself a priority? And in what ways are you taking care of you? If you're like, yes, and most of us probably would say, yes, I take care of myself. In what ways are you doing that? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself on your self-care, on making yourself a priority? So what is self-care? Well, by definition, self-care is considered any activity we deliberately, I love that word, deliberately do in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. We deliberately do in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. But I honestly believe it's so much more. And I want to help you shift from just thinking it's about exercise or spa days or Netflix and chilling to creating an environment and a life where you are thriving. You're thriving in your business. You're thriving in your marriage. You're thriving in your parenting. You're thriving in you fill in the blank there. And you're not just surviving. Every successful mompreneur, wife, I know has some form of self-care built into their routine. They understand the importance of it for all the other areas. They understand that you've heard me say this so many times, that your business, your marriage, your parenting are only as good as you are. And yet somehow we still believe the lie that we need to be on the back burner, that one day we'll get back to those things. So I'm just curious, which one do you need the most help with? Which one is the one that you struggle with the most? Your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, or your physical well-being? Because when we try to boil the ocean and we try to focus on all of those areas all of the time, it can be overwhelming, especially if you have not been making yourself a priority at all. So really think about which one is the one that I need to be focusing on the most. So here is what self-care really is. Self-care improves relationships with yourself, with others. It reduces stress. It reduces depression, anxiety. And I think we all would agree, and that's what we would say self-care is and does. Yeah, we don't do it, right? Like we just don't do it. So why? And when I've researched and I've been coaching women over the years on this, number one is time. We say we don't have enough time. Number two is guilt. We feel guilty when we take time for ourselves because we should be, in air quotes, should be doing all of these other things. The third thing is we think it costs us too much. It's going to cost too much money to work on my physical health. It's going to cost too much money to work on my emotional well-being. Or we have an all or nothing mentality. So if we can't do, an hour of exercise or have a whole weekend with the girlfriends or, be able to go to a conference and spend a weekend away working on my own mental well-being, then I'm just not going to do anything at all. So we kind of have this all or nothing mentality. Another reason is that it's been so long since you have done anything for yourself or have done anything just for fun that you don't even have any idea of what fun looks like for you. And that was me. And y'all have heard me talk about that story when I was sitting on the couch and I couldn't think of one thing to do for hobby and recreation. And that really is what got my attention. And before I move on to share with you a little bit more about what self-care is, I want to share with you a story from the book that I think I talked about it in episode 4, was from Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles. And he talks about sharpening your saw. And he talks about, I think I actually shared the story in one of those episodes, but in case you didn't listen to that episode, I'm going to share it again here because it does apply. And he's talking about, imagine coming up in the woods and this man is just sawing and sawing and sawing and sawing, and he looks completely exhausted. And you're like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm sawing, I'm sawing. And, you notice that the saw looks a little dull. And so you're like, why don't you take a break and sharpen the saw? Because you're a smart woman, that's what we should do. And he replies back, I don't have time to sharpen my saw. I'm too busy sawing. And that's where that time comes in, where we're telling ourselves we don't have enough time for self-care because we're too busy sharpening everyone else's saw, but our own. And I want you to think about how ridiculous that story is. If he would slow down, sharpen the saw, he would move further. He would get further on with his goal of sawing down that tree. You would move further on in your business if you were sharpening your own saw. You would move further on in your marriage and your parenting and all of the other goals that you have if you're taking the time to sharpen your own saw. So self-care forces you to remove toxic people, to establish routines, make healthier choices with your food and beverage intake. And those are not easy things. They're not. But those are all examples of self-care. Some of you have some seriously toxic people in your life that just need to go. They can't go where you want to go. They can't go where you need to go. You're trying to up level and they're pulling you down. They're putting holes in your boat. You're working to paddle, but the holes they keep putting in the boat are not allowing you to get anywhere. They're actually making you sink. So self-care forces us to remove those toxic people. Self-care sometimes requires us to do uncomfortable things, like walking into the gym for the first time, address our problems instead of running from them, actually work on our business and in our business instead of just staying busy. You can be in business and you can be busy. Which one do you want to be? So self-care requires us to do those uncomfortable things. Again, walking into the gym for the first time. If you want to work on your physical health, you're going to have to make some decisions and do some uncomfortable things. It's going to be uncomfortable the first time you go to the gym physically too, because you're going to be sore, but you're going to push through that because you have a bigger goal in mind. Self-care is putting the phone down for the day and not checking that one last email. Self-care is having rules around your cell phone usage, rules around what you're going to respond to, how you're going to respond to, and if you're going to respond at all, and at what times of the day. Self-care refuels, recharges, and keeps us moving forward instead of breaking us down. Friends, we can't pour from an empty cup. And some of you are so empty, yet you just keep trying to pour and you keep trying to pour. It's just not possible. It's not possible. Self-care is making the choice to build the life you are not constantly trying to escape through overworking, substance abuse, over-exercising. Like, it's making the choice to build the life that you're not constantly trying to escape through. With regards to overworking, we hang out where we feel celebrated, not tolerated. And if you struggle as a mom with guilt, which I know a lot of you do, and I have as well, if you struggle with, maybe your marriage and your role as a wife, and you're feeling like you're being tolerated, whether it's self-inflicted guilt or whether it's been put on you by those other relationships, you don't want to hang out there because you don't feel celebrated, right? You feel like you're failing. And so it's so easy. It's so easy. And that's really my story on when I got to that place where I just didn't even know who I was anymore because I felt very celebrated in my business. I felt like I was helping people. I felt like I was a great leader. I felt like I was a great woman, in the business. Whereas I felt like I was lacking at home in all the departments. And it was complete lies I was believing in my head. But that is why I became an overworker. That's why I burnt myself out and why I found myself on that couch, not even realizing who I was anymore. So self-care is also defining what you want. I was just having this conversation with a coaching client today. Like, what do you want? Get really clear on that. And that will help you to not live up to the expectations of others. What do you want? Self-care is defining that. What do you want so that you don't live to the expectations of others 24/7, 365? Self-care requires us to set boundaries and maybe sometimes disappoint others. Actually, a lot of the time, disappoint others, because the only people who really get upset or disappointed when you start enforcing your boundaries are the ones who are benefiting from you not having any. So just keep that in mind. When you're setting a boundary, it's not to keep people out, it's to keep you whole. It's to keep you together. And that's self-care. Self-care is unapologetically being you, makeup on or makeup not on, a clean house or not, laundry done or laundry not done. It doesn't mean that life is all about you, but for some of you, you're not even on your own radar. You are judging yourself. You are holding your standards so high of yourself. And depending on the season that you're in, can I just pause and say grace upon grace each season? It doesn't matter whether you're putting diapers on babies, whether you're a baby in the business, or whether you're a seasoned veteran in the business. They're all difficult seasons and present different obstacles. So it's not that it gets easier as the kids get older. You're fighting different battles. So be unapologetically you and really get clear on who that is. Who is that person that you want to be? Self-care is a lifetime habit of parenting yourself and making the best choices for you. A lifetime habit of parenting yourself and making the best choices for you. This doesn't mean that you have a perfect life, that you make all the right decisions all the time, because sometimes we don't have all the answers to make what we think is the right decision, but we can be a person who parents ourselves and can make those tough decisions and make the choices and then go about the business of making it the right choice. Self-care is learning how to stop fixing yourself and start taking care of yourself. Stop fixing yourself and start taking care of yourself. It's almost like a midlife crisis prevention program. So when we stop fixing ourselves and start taking care of ourselves, that also in turn takes care of the problems you were trying to fix. Like start taking care of yourself. So it's like a prevention program instead of a recovery program, right? When you are working on preventing the burnout, preventing the midlife crisis, preventing the, oh my goodness, you wake up one day and you don't even know your spouse because you haven't dated in 20 years. It's a prevention as opposed to repair. If we prepare today, we don't have to repair tomorrow. John Maxwell says that. And it's so true. Self-care is having a life that actually is good rather than looks good to everyone else. It's a no mask required zone. And I want this community here in our Facebook community to be a place where you don't have to wear a mask, because I'm willing to share with you the areas that I fall short in and the things that I have learned the hard way. And I want you to have a life that is good rather than just looks good to everyone else. And you just keep telling yourself you're fine. You keep telling your friends that you're fine and that, this is going to pass, this is going to pass. And you know what? All we're doing when we do that is we're just sweeping all that under the rug. And that rug is getting higher and higher and higher on the floor. And what happens? You start tripping over it. And then it goes from a little trip to a bigger trip and then a complete fall. So how can you think of self-care as actually creating a life that is good as opposed to just looking good to everyone else on the outside? Because you're not fooling anybody. And it's not doing you any good to fake it. Self-care is taking responsibility for your own needs and not depending on others all the time. Y'all have heard my story. I was totally depending on Shaw for all of my needs, to meet all of my needs. And it wasn't until I made that decision after my mentor gave me that tough love and decided I'm responsible for becoming the woman I want to be. I'm responsible for the joy that I'm looking for. I'm responsible for the confidence I'm looking for. I'm responsible for those needs. And so when we stop depending on others all the time to give that to us, that's what self-care is. It's taking care of yourself and taking responsibility for your own needs. When other people, encourage us and they speak our love language, like those are all bonus, right? Those are all bonus moments. And yes, our spouses have responsibilities for meeting our needs, and so do our children. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own needs. Self-care is becoming the person you can easily recognize when you look in the mirror, the person you were meant to be. If you find yourself looking in the mirror and you're like, who is this person? Who is this person I've become? Whether you're struggling with, guilt or depression or anxiety or maybe anger, and you're like, who is this raging, bitter, angry woman that I have become? Self-care helps you to become the person that you can recognize in the mirror when you look at her, and you can be excited and be proud of her. So that's a lot. And it's way more probably than what you thought coming into the podcast, or maybe what you have perceived self-care to be. But this is how I see self-care. And this is how I coach women about self-care. And I don't really like to even use the word self-care because it is so watered down and it is so overused. And it is one of those words where people are like, yeah, get a pedicure, or I'm going to go on a weekend with the girlfriends. That's not enough. That one weekend away is not going to be the fix or the cure that you're looking for. It's a lifetime habit of parenting yourself and making the best choices for you. Okay, so what self-care isn't? Number one is selfish. It's not selfish. It's necessary. It's necessary for success in all of the roles that you play as a mompreneur. How can you be a great mom, friend, wife, entrepreneur if you're empty, if you're tired, or you just have no clue what truly lights you up? And yet that's what we're expecting of ourselves. We're expecting us to be this super mom, this super mompreneur when we're empty. So self-care isn't selfish. I honestly think it's more selfish not to, because you cannot show up as the wife, the woman, the mom, the mompreneur that you want to be if you're empty. So it's selfish to not take care of you. Number two, self-care isn't going to happen. It's not going to just happen. You're not just going to wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, I'm so excited and motivated and pumped after listening to this podcast, and I'm just going to start doing all these things that Martine's telling me to do. It needs to be planned. It needs to be scheduled in. It needs to be prioritized. When Shaw and I first, we went to a marriage conference, and this is years ago. It was actually before we even had children. And one of the things they said to us was, you should be scheduling date nights every single week. Date nights weekly, one night away overnight, monthly, and then a yearly vacation, just the two of you. And that has always stuck with me. And while we haven't maybe done the one night away every month, we do date nights every Friday night. But they didn't just start happening because we went to that conference and we got the information. We had to schedule it in. We had to schedule the babysitter at the time. When we started having kids, we had to schedule the babysitter to be there. We had to make plans for it. So I think we get so frustrated with ourselves because we have this expectation that we should just start doing these things, but they're not natural for you. If you haven't been on a date night in 20 years, it's not going to be natural the first time. It's actually going to be pretty awkward. But you schedule it in. You schedule the babysitter. If you haven't been to the gym in 10 years or 2 weeks or whatever, you have to schedule it in. Get the accountability that you need to show up. Scheduling time with kids. I remember when I was going through this phase as a mompreneur, and I was really whipping myself about guilt. I mean, felt guilty when I was working. I felt guilty when I was with the kids. I was just really going through it. And my coach just said, are you scheduling in time with your kids? And I can remember, like, that's not fun. Like, what kind of mom am I that I have to schedule in time with my kids? Or what kind of wife am I? Like, that's not sexy to schedule date nights. They should just be spontaneous. But at the end of the day, what's more important? That it gets done? That you have that time with your spouse? That you have that time with the kids? Or that it just should be spontaneous and it should just be part of who you are? It's not. It's a new habit. So give yourself some grace here and realize that whatever self-care you're going to try to implement, which is key after this podcast, don't just get excited and inspired. You know me, implement. It's not going to happen on accident. Success is not an accident. So how can you be proactive in scheduling in the things about your self-care that you want? Even if it's, all right, I know that I need to remove a seriously toxic person from my life. Schedule in time to think about what I want to say to this person. How do I want, what specific things do I need to say to them? What day am I going to schedule this in? Like, you have to just take that next step or it will never get done. You'll still have that toxic person in your life. You'll still not be at the gym. You'll still not be doing date nights. So schedule it in. What gets scheduled in and gets done. And that's a whole nother podcast that I will be doing here in the future. But just know self-care does not happen on accident. Number 3, and you've heard this now, pretty much the whole podcast, it's not just about salt baths and chocolate cake, right? Those are ways to enjoy life, not escape it. And self-care is not just wrapped around those two things. So now you may be saying, okay, so how do I get started, Martine? Like, I really, my eyes are open. So how can I get started? And the first thing I want to say is saying no. You have to learn to say no and make a list of the things that you need to say no to. Just like I said, prepare for that meeting with that toxic person. Make a list of the things that you need to say no to and continue to make this a habit. Keep yourself in check by asking yourself, is this something I want to trade in my time with my family or myself for? It's a really key question. Is this something I want to trade in my time with my family or myself for? And if it's not, then don't. Say no. Number 2 is move more, eat cleaner. We just need to be moving our bodies every single day, only exercise on the days you really want to feel good. And remember, food is fuel. So be conscious of small changes you can do right now. Maybe you need to add another glass of water to your regimen. Maybe you want to cut down on the snacking. Maybe you want to cut down on the time of night you stop eating. But just what's a small change that you can implement right now and get a quick win? Number 3 is sleep. Average adult needs 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I know some of you are going to push back on that and say, I've been getting 5 hours of sleep every night and I feel good. The average adult needs 7 to 8 hours of sleep. It messes with your hormones, ladies. And it's just one of those things that does not need to be compromised. Number 4, regular checkups with your doctor. When's the last time you had your mammogram? When's the last time you went to the dentist? When's the last time you had a physical? Regular checkups with your doctor. Get them scheduled in. Number 5, maybe it's meditation or relaxation exercises, yoga. That's something you can implement to help you with your self-care to kind of relax you physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Number 6, spend time with who matters most in your life. Really think about who are you spending the most time with, and are they the people that matter most to you right now in this season? And number 7, laugh. Yeah, laughter is the best medicine. I was telling someone the other day, I was being interviewed for a magazine, and I said, if you can make me laugh, we'll be best friends for life. Because I love to laugh. I love to make other people laugh. And it really is just so good for the soul. And it doesn't take but 5 seconds on your phone to find something funny on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, on YouTube videos, whatever. Like laughter, we need more laughter. We need more laughter. We need more sleep in our life, for sure. Okay. So as I said before, self-care is not selfish. It is our responsibility. We are responsible for resting our body, our minds, and our souls. Like truly learning how to meet your own needs, because most other people won't, right? Even the best husbands, the best friends, it's not their responsibility to, it's ours to truly meet our own needs. So what is your mindset on self-care? Are you giving all your energy and trust to things outside of you? Are you waiting for someone else to come and help you and change this for you? Do you believe self-care is for the fragile and the weak? Again, these are questions to ask yourself. This is no judgment from me. I'm just giving you some questions to truly ask yourself. Because once you become fully self-aware, then you know what your next step is. Do you believe that you are this strong workhorse who has no limits and a never-ending to-do list? And does your significance come from those lists? Does your worth come from how productive you are or not? Do you wear busy as a badge of honor, a badge of importance? I love what Shauna Niequist said in her book, and I shared this on another episode, but the best thing I can offer this world is not my force or energy, but a well-tended spirit, a wise and brave soul. Friend, it takes courage to slow down. It does. I'm not saying anything that I've talked to you about so far on this podcast is easy to do. It's not, but you're worth it. And it's worth it. It's worth pushing through the uncomfortableness. It's worth having that difficult conversation. It's so worth it to get on the other side and know that you're making the best decisions for you and that your needs are being met. It takes courage to walk into that gym for the first time. It takes courage to say no, finally. Brene Brown said, I saw this recently put really all over social media. She says it takes courage to say yes to rest and play in a culture where exhaustion is seen as a status symbol. It takes courage to go against the grain. It's taken a lot of courage for me to go against the hustle culture. And I'm not against hustle culture overall, but I am against that's the only way to be successful as a mompreneur is to hustle 24/7, 365. Exhaustion should not be hey, look at me. I'm this, mom, boss mom that's just killing it. But you're dying inside. You're exhausted. I've seen it. So you don't have to damage your body, your soul, and the people you love most in order to get done what you think you have to get done. You don't have to live like this, friends. We've all been believing a lie, or maybe you're not believing it anymore, but you believed it before. A lie that busy is better than connecting. A lie that this is just how life is. That one day we will get there, again, air quotes. A lie that our identity is in the roles, in all of the roles we play, all the hats we play, and not who God created us to be, not do. God made us human beings, not human doings. You were created on purpose and for a purpose. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning of the podcast. You are an amazing woman gifted by God to do great things. You're an amazing man gifted by God to do great things, but you can't do it if you're burnt out. You can't do it if you're trying to pour from an empty cup. So I hope that this gave you a different perspective on self-care. I hope that you will take time after this podcast, even if it's just 5 minutes, and just jot down, answer some of the questions that I asked you throughout the podcast. And what's your next step? Not your next 10 or even your next 5. What's just your next step right now when you get off of this podcast? What's going to be your next step tomorrow? And then go do that thing. And then your next step, what is that? Go do that thing. Be a person of action. And you will see your mindset transformed. You will see your energy transformed. And you'll start, again, to build a life that is good rather than just looks good. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope, again, that it just gave you a different perspective on self-care. I hope you will come over to Instagram and connect with me and let me know what you thought about the show. And thank you so much for continuing to support the show, continuing to share the show, follow the show, leave a rating and review. You are speaking my love language when you leave me a review, because words of affirmation is my love language. So love you, mean it, and I will see you or hear you, or you'll hear me on the next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.